Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an episode of Silver Line titled A Worthy Conversation. I'm your host, Wakim Zaidan, and my co-host, Azab Hassan. We both welcome you to this session. Today's talk is titled The Culture Climate Change. And we're going to basically discuss how the impact of the pandemic or how the pandemic affected funding culture in the MENA region. We've seen a lot of initiatives happening around the region. We're not sure how well they were impacted. We have initiatives such as the one done by AFAC for the artists in dire conditions. We have an initiative done by the Ministry of Culture in Abu Dhabi, which was a national relief fund for creatives. We even have, we had e-residency programs for artists done by certain art galleries. So there are lots of initiatives that happened in the region. But today I'm joined by an expert who has been researching those initiatives, MENA-wide, and she is a resource mobilization expert. I've met Ouafa Belgasem actually online, and our relationship has been online for the past 3 years. When she launched the Cultural Funding Watch, where she did an index, and in it she was trying to collect data about the creative and cultural industries. We're gonna at the end talk about her last initiative, which is CCI Boost. But I had the pleasure of meeting Ouafa and having lots of conversations with her across the board on the situation of the creative and cultural industries. Without further ado, I would like to introduce her to kind of tell us a bit about herself very briefly. And then she'll kick in kind of giving us a good picture about what has happened or maybe still happening. I don't know, that's what we're gonna hear from her with regards to the impact of the pandemic in the region. So Ouafa, welcome and thank you for joining us. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Wakim. Thank you so much. Very briefly, who I am and what I do, because the most interesting is debate what's happening for the art and culture. I'm a Tunisian, French citizen, and I'm based in Tunisia. And CFW I have created is a creative enterprise. We mainly really work on everything related to facilitating access to resources for cultural creative actor in the MENA and Africa region. So we work on over 3 pillars that correspond to 3 barriers to this access. First is access to information. We realize that people don't know the information, where are the resources are not available. So we sort, map, clean, and put on our website, CFW, all those resources here. And we have created also parallel to that, the biggest online donor database for cultural creative industries. The second barrier is capacity, because it's not enough to know there is a call. You need to know how to design a project, how to develop a fundraising strategy. So we offer all the services related to access to these resources, plus training, because as you all know, there are very few specialists on resource mobilization for cultural creative industry in our region. We find grant hunter, but they are not resource specialists. They're not sustainability partner. We need specialists and experts that work on that. And the third pillar, we're saying that's not still enough. It's not enough, there is an opportunity. It's not enough to write a very good proposal if there is no one willing to invest in the cultural creative industries. So the third pillar we work on is research, advocacy, and what we call it donor recruitment and donor retention. So we try to bring on the ecosystems, people who are not use it to fund us, or who don't even think to fund or invest in cultural creative industry, very quickly. So part of our mission, then I said, is mapping and following up what are the mechanisms, the trends, and how is cultural creative industry financing strategies and policy going on. And of course, during the pandemic, for us, it was obvious. It's our mission to try to understand what are the policies and strategies in support and funding the cultural creative sector in the emergency situation. So this is the transition to our discussion today. So and it's funny because this COVID crisis happened in the moment where we are started the study on art emergency fund in general, just before COVID. And there were already very few, like specialized grant or support team for emergency. There were, I remember I was mapping them. The one I know, and I'm telling you, I'm someone who has nosy. I have more than 10 years just following this And I know there must be not more than 5, 6 of them. The surplus in the United States, there is one based in Brussels. I don't remember the name, but in Brussels, and it was really specific, launched right after the Syrian crisis. And it was really specific in emergency and crisis funding for art actors. There was one other, also there are one other on the Prince Claus Fund. They have the surplus, the SER fund, which is more for heritage in emergency situation, and one from the ICRAM. So when the COVID happened, because myself also, I used to work as a fundraiser in emergency and international organization in humanitarian onset. CFW were very reactive to the COVID crisis. And the first thing we've done is, okay, let's gather everybody in the beginning of a crisis. This was the 20th March. Like it was really 5 days after the lockdown in Tunisia. And we said, we need to gather all the people we know and we don't know to try together in a very short time, put those knowledge. How do you deal? Whoever have even a little experience, how to support art, culture, creative sector in emergency, please share with us your learning. So that first conference happened in 1st of March. It was really good. We was really happy. It was like, I think there were around 300 attendees in that conference from everywhere, Australia, America, MENA, and there were the, let's say, the people we know, the usual suspect, and the people we know less on the cultural creative sector. Sorry, just give me a second. I would like to, taille réelle, plein largeur, comment on fait ça? No, I need help.
Ouafa, you can do Command L. It should fit into screen.
Où ça?
The Command L. Letter L. Command L.
Where you find
that? In Fenêtre, I think. I'm not used to the French interface.
I think I got something.
Yes.
Voilà.
There you go.
Thank you. So this is the first conference, and it was called Art Emergency Funding in Time of Crisis. We had UNESCO, and all what to say about this first conference is that the major conclusion was how unprepared everybody was. Whether they are, this was the words of the one of the speakers that was from the National Endowment for the Art from the United States. So there was a really little experience in art support in onset crisis. We have, and during this conference, we called for collecting the data. So as consequence to that, we put, as Culture Funding What, we put a team of researcher volunteers. CFW for years, we're only work, there is no funder behind us. We do things by our own. So there was a call for international researcher volunteers, and we're very happy. It was a team of 9. And of course, we couldn't do it on a very large scale. So we targeted 15 countries where we could access information. We actually, this first mapping happened during the lockdown. So there was no way we move or we go. And so the data collection was based on, we sent one, a questionnaire to people we know. If you know of any measure, please share. And then we did a lot of desk research, like going on all the ministries' websites, going on the groups, contacting friends, watching on Facebook. And we have complemented those research with interviews with main actors or focal points in different countries we have through our different networks. Joaquim was one of them, thank you again. So we tried to complement all these data. We focused honestly, like many other research that rapid mapping happened in that time, on the word of mouth, on the impression. But one big conclusion also from this research: zero data, zero reliable data, zero transparency, real transparency about what. So you could find information about, okay, there is the global amount, $1 billion allocated by minister or a queen or something, but when, how, very few have been very clear, and the information on time. Like one of the problem of communication about the emergency is really clarity and transparency about what are the decisions, what are the resources, that being put available. So what we concentrated on is really trying, in the absence of quantitative data, we try to concentrate on, try to understand how does it work. And one of the main conclusions in the different countries that we have worked on is the complexity of our ecosystems. If you compare in Europe, for example, the major player, the flow of resources is really obvious. You have much less stakeholder in the culture creative ecosystem with the power of either supporting or even disturbing the ecosystem, that it's much more complex in our country than in Europe. So if we have tried to map what are the support mechanisms, who are the initiator, and who are the targeted by those support. So in the MENA region, main actor are government and ministry. So it's the institutional stakeholder that it's playing the major role in support. There are, again, also non-profit art organization. There were also some supports coming, surprisingly, from non-profit social welfare organizations. So they are not mainly art-dedicated organization, but they have provided somehow support to the cultural creative actors. Private sector have provided some of the support. And when we talk here about private sector, we mentioned the private foundation in our countries. Like in Tunisia, we have Biad Foundation. It's a bank foundation. Al-Qattan, it's actually in Palestine, linked to a bank. Schumann, it's also, so these are private sector support mechanisms initiated by them. And there are very, very few support mechanism launched by community of practice. And by community of practice, we mean the artists themselves, like as an act of solidarity, some wealthy one giving to less wealthy, or some, some in crowdfunding campaign also launched by the community of practice itself. These have existed, but they are really, really rare. Like on the 15 countries that we have mapped, I think there must be more than 7 that we knew of. Now, the second major stakeholder are the beneficiary. One conclusion also of this study, it has tried actually to everyone, visual, music, performing, some administrative worker for the creative sector, some for the organization, and the private non-profit foundations. So the resources try to give to everyone. And that's one of the main trends of the policies and measures. I feel from the primary finding of the research, there was very little prioritization. There was very little strategic humanitarian support, like targeting. It was like try to satisfy and help everyone. And I think even in the mind of the decision maker, of the supporter, there was, because when you work, the process here, for example, the type of support that is given money, it's known to be the cash support. So it's the cash, we call it the cash transfer in the humanitarian jargon. And that cash, it's a science في حد نفسها يعني. There are people who wrote theses about the ABCs, how you proceed with cash transfer, how you communicate about it, how you prioritize. And it was, all this learning was missing on all those responses, especially the communication about it, because the success, as we said, also one in the discussion on the first conference, I was saying, guys, raising money to respond to a crisis is the easiest part of this support. Mobilizing resource is the easiest, especially in the beginning, because there is this willingness, this solidarity effort. Everybody wants to help. So mobilizing the funder when you lead on a program to support a sector, as a government or as a big foundation, it's easy. When you have the credibility, the legitimacy, bring the people together, everybody will try to help. But the hardest, and what is usually left to the end, is how you're gonna distribute that money. The success of an emergency response to a sector is your ability to provide the resource to the right people at the right time, not 6 months later. It's too late. I mean, if someone is waiting for food, give him food 6 months later, he's dead. The same for an artist. Like if you're trying to survive, you have debts, you have a payment and loans. It was really nice, and we've seen it. A lot of announcements. This foundation is mobilized 1 million euros. You know, it took, in some countries in our study, it took 4 months, a total blackout. What's going on with that money? And that's a problem, because why? Because it creates two problems. You didn't prepare your community to the fact that in an emergency response, not everybody is going to get the same help. There will be prioritization. There are more people in need than the other. So you have to communicate properly about the fact that you have to accept that as a beneficiary, you may not get the same thing than the other, and some may not even have. And that's the principle of an emergency and prioritization. The case for some enterprises, you could say, yes, everybody got damaged, everybody has losses. This is, everybody agrees. However, how I am less vulnerable to that crisis than an artist who is a freelancer, for example. You know, so that's, you have to prepare your community. And how to prepare them? It's not to tell them, you are nice. No, it's with your community of practice, then you together define the criteria. There must be an acceptance. And the acceptance comes, it's not by telling them, you little girl, boy, this is how it comes, but involving the community of practice in those decisions. Unfortunately, in our countries, in the region at least, we have the involvement of the community or the final beneficiary was either totally absent or totally superficial. Like, okay, write in the paper, what are your needs, and send them, we will take them into consideration. Or not at all, what I call it the Zorro syndrome. Like, Zorro, I'm alone. You know, I do everything, you get a minister or a ministry, yes, we're gonna save the country, we have, and then so, no, it doesn't work like that. We are not babies, we're adults, and we know how things are being done. And these kind of mistakes that happen. So very quickly, if we cluster the support mechanism that have been put in place, there are two big categories, the hard and the soft. So, and in most of the countries, there was a mix of both. So, for example, if you take the most known and how to say, مشكورين يعني initiatives are United Arab Emirates and Tunisia for their reactiveness and because again we know the program, we haven't seen the impacts yet. So at least on paper the approaches were plus ou moins thought. So there was a mix of money distribution, cash, like just to survive, a relief, you call it a relief cash, just to pay people bills, immediate thing, or grant. Some also grants for cash, but informal grants because they mostly were linked to projects. Like, okay, we fund an exhibition for an artist or a work for artists or something. So it was a way to subsidize and help them. Some hard support was social security. And the crisis had, in many countries, raised awareness and triggered or brought back into discussion some of the major issues towards the precarity and vulnerability of the art workers in different ecosystems. The absence of social security and safety net systems, the absence of access to medical support, government support or schemes. So if, for example, in the case of Tunisia, it has really, the government has used that to revive that thing and bring the community around it, because a mutual in insurance of artists had exists. But, you know, all new things were, you know, at the beginning were difficult to adopt, you know. So COVID was a kind of a crisis that had accelerated a deployment of that mechanism. The softs, they took form of training. So online free courses, online trainings, online capacity building and new things. And we've seen many people took that opportunity to improve some knowledge, experience, and expertise. Other soft support that comes also from community practice, where the opportunities sharing. I'm sure you all have seen those lists of COVID emergency response for artists from America, from Africa, from CFW, for example. We have compiled this COVID support mechanism for the MENA and Africa region, and we circulated. And of course, the soft is the natural artist or human to human support. Like there were a group of support on Facebook, mental health, a group of, calls, this kind of support. Oops. Okay. So the tools. There are, as I told you, there are many different tools have been put in place to support financially the artists. So some of them are acquisition. So acquisition is the government who buys or somebody else buys artists' work in a way to subsidize. That was, for example, something new in the United Arab Emirates. I think it was like $400-something million by the governor to buy artworks during the first phase of the COVID. In Tunisia, this practice is a standard, actually. Every year, the Tunisian government over the last 40 or 50 years buys artist artwork every year. There is a commission, buys every year. So it's a way to support the artists. Some acquisitions, they're not in the form of acquisition, but initiatives that help artists at both. I mean, two birds, one stone. Buy artist work, and part of the income goes for the artist, part of the income goes for the fund to fight corona, the disease. So it was by an initiative called Archivar. The supporter also, like crowdfunding, etc. Training and technical assistance, this kind of support, as I told you, resources, free courses, coaching. Some hackathons also happened. So they organize a hackathon, how to help fight corona, and they give a little amount to the winner. So it was like a win-win situation. I can mention in Tunisia, the United Nations has organized a hackathon about this, also how art and artists could come up with ideas to support things. Ideathons also happened a lot. I remember I've heard of some in United Arab Emirates, in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Morocco. So many of those hackathons happened. Tax wage and relief. The tax wage is that the government, in addition to giving some cash grants, or they have decided to, for example, to delete a tax, for example, to freeze some type of tax over a certain period of time. So, for example, tax on revenue have been suspended for a certain wage. Tunisian government also have negotiated, and that wasn't specific to culture creative sector. It was to the enterprises as all. But if your status as a culture creative actor is private sector, then you are entitled to access this. So there was another mechanism, which is moratorium, like freezing the interest on any loan for a certain period with the banks. But that is debatable, because there was a lot of issue about that later, but I'm not going there. Social security, safety nets, also facilitating access to social security, putting the subscription wage low, very low, or paying it on behalf of the artists or the people needing to subscribe to those schemes. Relief-oriented grant for project. This is more relief-oriented, less of investment strategy. And this is also one of our main conclusion of the study. The very, very low investment during the COVID and the post-COVID positioning. Most of the responses and the processes and support were just trying to relieve and haven't really thought of the COVID as an opportunity. And as a conclusion, we as a creative sector in our region have missed a lot. It's not a lack of knowledge, and barakallah alayhum, they are amazing, and we have a brilliant minds. But if you don't support brilliant minds with investment, nothing happens. And that was a missing opportunity. I really do believe there was a very little investment in that. So again, the conclusion are most of the support are coming from government. The case of, for example, Morocco and Algeria. Sometimes it's by mixed task force, like a mixed by government, like special support task force put in place in Tunisia, for example. It was a mix between Le Fonds Relance Culture. It was a program that was put in place by government, two Tunisian foundations, Kamel Azhar Rambourg, Fondation Biat, third foundation. Like the main player in the cultural creative investment and financing in Tunisia came up together in this fund. But in other countries, most of the thing is led by private sector, like the independent sector, the case of Lebanon. The government has nothing. All the support were coming either from the community practice itself or regional, international organization like AFAC, like Mawred, etc., supporting the security. However, there is another big player, the big things like Netflix, Google. Netflix, you know, they have pledged $100 million at the beginning of the COVID in support to the video making sector all over the world. And again, you know, when we are small and not too many to work on this, I mean, CFW, we are a mid-sized organization in the MENA and Africa. And I would love that I had the capacity to go to Netflix and say, okay, Netflix, your market, we are part of your big market. So our share in this 100,000 shouldn't be 1 million. It shouldn't be. I mean, the 1 million pledged by Netflix, I think they gave 500 to AFAC, and then AFAC is distributing it to the sector in the region. And I haven't heard more than that. I think it's 500 or 1 million maximum. Shouldn't be. We should be more advocacy and influencing and saying, this is the size of the MENA Africa, or at least the MENA market who uses Netflix. This should be our size of your support. Google is the same. And for example, Google put something, an emergency for the creative sector, but there were maybe 2 countries eligible to access. It was the Emirates and another country, I think Lebanon or Egypt. So there were 2 over 22 countries. Doesn't make sense. Yemen is a very special, specific example. Yemen, there was, of course, the situation is like depressing there, and it's oh, there is a cat. It's amazing that some of the art and culture people still really doing amazing work there. The only support that was available, and we think UNESCO and a guy now named Ahmed Zawish, who's leading on a UNESCO Cash for Work project, and it was used to help the sector during the COVID. So again, the broad finding, there are regional initiatives, but they are immediate artist relief. There were solidarity funding, and there were international players. So the main conclusion is we have a much complex ecosystem. So we have our local, national organization, governments, but we have international players. You have l'IFT, l'Institut Français, you have the GUT, you have the British. So all these people are playing and have played a role during the emergency, which makes it much more difficult to manage during, because of, again, the problem of data and transparency and immediate access to information about how much, who's for whom, and what and when was being mobilized. And again, also, and this absence of coordination space to make those emergency response efficient is completely, there was no space, whether virtual or physical or mechanism, to help coordinate the emergency responses in our such complex ecosystem. And that's one emergent need that we need. For example, in the humanitarian world, there is a coordination mechanism, United Nations OCHA, it's called. OCHA, who plays this role of coordinating the support for a humanitarian crisis. So you basically have immediate information, picture on who's pledging how much money was being given, to whom, etc., which makes the response much more efficient. So there is no duplication, there is no delays, there is distribution of roles. For example, we know why, as I said in the beginning, one of the talons d'Achille of the weakness of those responses during what we have observed is the delay of dispersing and accessing those resources. It's because people did not, or the actors or the stakeholder did not share roles based on their capacity. So I would say in the first phase of a response, it shouldn't be the government leading because it's very complex mechanism. It's slow, should be independent sector, foundation, national foundation, because those decision-making is quick, mechanism and approval is quick. So the first, let's say, 1 month response should be led. That doesn't mean that they have to do them by their own, but the disbursement and the practicality should, the operationality should be done by those, because they will be more responsive. Second phase, maybe with more institutional players who are much more, how to say, heavy and much more bureaucratic. The challenges, so efficiency, as I said, release the fund in timely manner, communicate information, because again, the information is very important. If you keep people in the dark, you're preventing them from their 60% of their chance to survive a crisis. Because when you tell me, don't expect help, I'll figure out, it's much better than make me wait, expect them for help that will never come. So 60% of my chances survivor is about having this information. Don't leave people. We've been put in the dark for so long during the COVID. It was unacceptable. For me, it was almost insulting. Like, come on, I'm not a baby. Tell me you're not getting it, fine, I'll figure out. But don't wait, we'll tell you we're not babies. At least me, I'm very old. The third is do no harm. The do no harm, it's a principle in any, it's an international principle of cooperation. You should, before doing anything in an ecosystem or a country, be aware the risk of doing some damage without intentionally. So when you come to disturb an ecosystem or play a role in an ecosystem, please consider first what you may cause as harm and mitigate that. And the first conclusion, we need to have smart investment, not only responsive and relief, but positioning, helping those who came up with a very good idea and who can seize opportunity to position and offer services on that. I mean, I don't want to name a project, but I was like, God, I had a creative in Tunisia talking about the project idea, amazing, because there was no investment in those things at the moment. He wasn't ahead on the need. 6 months later, it was done by an international cultural coordination from the north, the exact same idea. And it's a very important positioning thing. He could have done it because I heard him talking about it 3 months before this international cultural north cooperation thing has started talking about it. This is now impact, the COVID impact. So I'm sharing with you some of the statistics that we have collected in Tunisia. We've tried, again, this is back to the data. The Arabs in our region, we are shahihin too much about the data. My God, we need to get to this level of awareness raising that the data, it helps everyone. So we have launched this questionnaire. It was ready and designed to provide statistics for every country. So we can extract the data per country and give you, this is one sample. It was like 30 questions, a very good questionnaire, very thorough one. We circulated, but from the MENA region, I mean, you know, at time of crisis, we were as CFW dealing with lots of things. So for the MENA, there was like 30 or 40 respondents. So I focused on Tunisia and to get better sample. So this is the Tunisian response. It's a short, يعني على statistics. Sorry, it's in French, but I'm gonna read you. 89% said that the COVID has a negative impact in their business or work or life. 11% only said they haven't seen, they don't know yet. 90% of the respondents are unhappy with the government measures or the support measures that have been provided. Among these, 55% have never benefited of any support from government support. 38% of them have shifted to remote working, virtual working. And the respondent said that the loss average is 70% of their income, the loss in their resources during the first 6 months of the COVID. So this kind of data is really, we need it. And it's amazing because CFW, when we do a questionnaire, we have a deal with the people because we really believe on access to data and open source. So when you fill the questionnaire, everybody have filled it. We send back the whole result of the research, anonymous, of course, we take names and data, and we send it back to everybody. So when you contribute, you have access to the raw data, publish, write, we don't care. If you write before us, it doesn't matter. So, and still in our region, we don't really value sharing data. So what we did, I'm gonna share. So what we did also, we created this CCI boost. Maybe it's too long talking. I leave people, I keep space. And then if we can talk about the CCI boost later, Waqim, what do you think?
Yeah, we'll wrap up with the CCI boost. So let's take in some questions, okay. In case there are some. So Azza has a question for you, Wafa. She's okay. Basically asking you, sorry, considering the third challenge phase, which is the no harm challenge, if I'm not mistaken, when investing or mobilizing funds for the CCI, what are the tools that can help a stakeholder or an investor lower the chances of doing harm? Is there a way to know, Wafa, if you're doing harm?
There is no formula, but it's at least, how to say, sitting with the people and see, for example, I give an example. When you come and you start distributing cash, for example, an emergency response, without aligning to the community or the country decision or the group. Like, for example, if in Tunisia, we did it right and we have decided these are the criteria, these are the priority people, and this is where we want to orient our support. You don't come as an international organization or an NGO or a cultural cooperation center and do whatever you want, because you will disturb the thing, you will create friction, you will create problems. So this is, the do no harm is a process, it's not a tool, it's a way of doing things.
Okay, I get you. So you mentioned that our ecosystem is quite complex in order to kind of pull off a more streamlined coordination. Was there any suggestions of solutions to handle that? For example, would a model of a cooperative or a union for the culture sector work in helping those kind of coordinations? Or is it only entities like the UN who are capable of doing that?
Actually, it should be something online. It's easy to put in place. And what I said in the second conference, because after the first conference, we did it in March, we did the follow-up in November. So there was a second conference. I can share it with you later, or Waqim can share the link, the Facebook page. You will find the podcast, the full podcast of the first one, and we'll be soon putting the second one. I said it's not good to try to duplicate. So if the UN OCHA system exists, it's easy to go and approach them and say, okay, can we, within your framework, have a section specific to the cultural creative industries? Or at least it's a UN agency. So there should be a way, and I am sure they will always be open to support anyone who asks, you know.
But the question,
otherwise, sorry?
But the question here, like, who will approach them, you know, from our end, let's say the Arab region end, you know? So there should be a coordinated effort on the NGO level for the industry itself.
Exactly, yes. We need to cluster somewhere. We need in every country, there must be a way where culture creative actors create those coordination mechanisms. Either a cooperation, an association, a network. It doesn't have to be even formalized. And it could be informal networks with online system to share information. It doesn't have to have a legal status.
I get you.
Yeah.
So something like CCI Boost probably would be a space to kind of do that. So if you can share the slide, I think, and
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just if you can share the website and tell us a bit about where it's at and where it's going also.
Okay, so the CCI Boost was created for, where is it? Was created to, beginning is, again, to do my job and convince funders and new donors to come and to invest in the sector. We use different tools, one of which is a face-to-face. I go and just talk about the sector, just bring them to the sector and see. So in Tunisia, we use it to organize every year an event, we call it the Resource Mobilization Info Day, where we invite culture creative sector supporter, whether they give money or loan or technical assistance or incubation. For us, it's a resource that it's out there. We give them, everyone, a table, and in the speed meeting format, every one of them will be presents his program, guidelines, condition, when and how, to 6-7 people sitting like a speed meeting, you know. When he finishes his presentation, these people will move to another table and he will welcome another group. So in 3 hours time, culture creative people attending our events may have met with 6-7 donors and heard about 6-7 support mechanism available for them outside. At the same time, those donors who were not used to think of us would sit and discover 30, 60, 50 culture creative actor and see a whole world that it's outside there. I also can share with you the event, the video of the last edition. I have invited the director of the 4 or 5 biggest business in Tunisia that have RSE, corporate social responsibility programs. And one of this comment of the one, Orange, let's the name, it's a big telecom company, said, where are you? He was saying, this is a mind opening for me, because this word, you're not visible to us. Where are you? So to talk to them, it's not enough. Okay, they've seen 15 people nice and have nice jobs. But when I talk to a banker to create a guarantee to the sector or give special thing, we need to talk numbers, right? So we have created first something called Culture Creative Enterprises Index, because there are some data about culture creative economy. There is the UN CTAD reports, there are the UNESCO reports, etc. But by the way, I read the 2013 report, UNESCO
I know,
report.
I read it too.
I'm very old. But there is very little on the entrepreneurs themselves, very little on enterprises themselves. So we started with the index for enterprises that helps generate statistical data about cultural creative enterprises. So how many jobs we create. So these are extracts from the index for cultural creative enterprises. And this index allows to generate data for any country in the world. It's open source, it's free. You just come here. Where is it? Sign in, I think, because this is the new version, we're upgrading. Yeah? Here, okay. So you come here and you fill in the form. There is a form to be filled. But when you fill and you have access to the system, this is what you have, what you access. This is also being upgraded and cleaned. This is the prototype. So here, this is a statistic of every single enterprises that had entered its data in the index. The nice thing about it is you can select for your country. So the more their country filling here, the system will generate data for every country. I will take Tunisia because it's the largest sample we have. Then look at the data. It's going to be adjusted based on the Tunisia statistics. So it gives me here culture creative enterprises by type. Are they cultural center, cinema, museums, production company, theater? Here, it will give me the distribution by legal status, limited company, freelancer, big corporation. Then here, it gives me information about the development stage, idea stage, acceleration, scaling up. Here, for example, the basic data. How many sample here, revenue they generate, income, job they create, women in leadership, etc. But the nicest even thing about it, I would tell the system, I want you to recalculate the whole statistic based only in this segment, and he will do it. Okay, move, yes. So he has, the system recalculates based on this. Better than that, you can even choose 2 sectors. He said, I want the cultural center plus the co-working space because I consider them both. And then the thing will recalculate based on this. Same here, you can select by region. Let's say, oh, my internet is very select all. And you can say, I want MENA only, Middle East and North Africa. He will give me the statistics based on my selection. So what we decided to do now is to upgrade this platform from just an index to a platform that share the data, create the spaces where cultural creative industries, investor, financer can find, meet, and fund whoever they want to fund. There will be a training courses. It's like a community, a platform communautaire. How do we say that, Naqim?
Community platform.
Exactly, but for cultural creative industries entrepreneurs. Very quickly, this is what we have done.
All right. Thank you very much, Ouafa. This was very useful and enlightening. And I believe, I mean, we've discussed that several times, that we need to kind of forward the efforts between MENA and BCC.
Exactly.
So I mean, with us as Silverline trying to kind of gather as much as members as we can, and with you doing that in North Africa, and hopefully we'll try to find more actors in different regions. So as a collective, we'll be able to connect and throw in our weight, you know, not necessarily during pandemics, but even throw in our weight to make sure we bring in money to the sector as investments, as donors, as financing, you know, loans and so on, or even as resources in general, in kind. So, so I think to that, we can bring this conversation to an end. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. Did I miss any in the chat box? I haven't. So whoever joined us tonight, Nawaf, Yusuf, Wijdan, Wijdan, yes, thank you very much for joining us. The recording is going to be posted in the coming 2 days. We'll share it with the community who couldn't join us tonight. Ouafa, as always, it's always lovely to have a conversation with you, and every single time I learn something new from your end. And we can't agree more on the importance of data for everything that we're trying to achieve as creatives. So thank you again. Well done on your efforts. I always congratulate you for it, and hopefully we'll be able to join forces even more moving into the future. And with CCI Boost now in place, I think it's a beautiful platform to start with as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
See you around.
شكرا يا عائشة.